Okay, so I just got this SDS1202X-E Siglent scope, and one of the reasons I got it is because I've been kind of interested in audio electronics lately, and I wanted to use the FFT to kind of look at distortion from amps and other audio-based stuff. And so I just kind of wanted to give people a look at that portion of it, because when I was looking at videos and reviews, oftentimes the FFT portion was just a quick, oh yeah, it does it. And I think other people might find this interesting. So what I've got here is a 1 kilohertz wave. So I'm going to bring up math. I've already got FFT selected from channel 1. And first I want to change my horizontal divisions, or my divisions per hertz, down quite a bit. A 5 kilohertz, right? And then I'm going to put my center at 10 kilohertz. So that's already kind of looking nice. And then I can use my cursors here to see where I'm at, where I'm hitting my peaks. That's 1 kilohertz. So that's looking pretty good. I find it somewhat easy to set up, but it seems like this encoder is a little bit funny sometimes. Let me come back to here. But I've got a nice audio signal, and I can see that it's pretty clean too. And I move my cursor over here. I'm up around 30 kilohertz. So that's looking kind of nice. So now I'm just going to up my frequency by a kilohertz. Oops. So that's up to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the T, it looks like the 10 is dead on the, because I set the center at 10. So that's looking very nice. So one thing I find kind of weird about this is that when I change horizontal, it also changes I don't know. I don't quite understand that. So I've got this cheapo amp, and I'm going to hook it up to my dummy load, and I'm going to pump a signal into it and distort it, and then we'll watch the FFT to watch the distortion. Okay, so again I'm back to 1 kilohertz. I'm coming in the normal input to the amplifier, and I'm going to turn this has got both a pre and post gain. Turn that up about a quarter. Turn this down a little bit. And bring that down. I can also take the scale, and I can change that a little bit, but a little bit makes a big difference. So if I take my cursor, go over here, alright, so now let's, I'm going to turn up the pre and see if I can start to saturate it. Yeah, and so visually, so I can start to see the distortion. Yeah, so let's take a look at where that is. Oops. So that's 6.6 kilohertz. Wait. That's around 1.1. That's 3, yeah, so that's the third. The fifth. The seventh, yeah. So that's some pretty obnoxious distortion going on. This does have a saturation input. I'm curious what it's going to look like, but it is, you know, as far as being a tool to use for audio, it is working pretty good for me here. So that's kind of a fun experiment. I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to switch to the saturation input and see what they're doing there. Yeah, they're doing some kind of funky distortion there. To say the least. So that's again around 1. Oh, that's 3 again. 5. Interesting. So I've just got this Ross distortion box. I'm going to see what it looks like. So this is the distortion coming out. A little over 1 kilohertz. First fundamentals at a third. Fifth. Interesting. Seventh. Ninth. Okay, I'm just looking at this amp here, and I'm just feeding it some white noise from my computer over here, and then I've got it hooked up in the back. I don't have the speaker connected, but instead I have it going to a dummy load, a great big green resistor there. So what I'm going to show then is how well I can use the FFT on this scope to characterize the frequency response of this amplifier. Alright, so to try to characterize the frequency response in this amplifier, I have all the tone knobs. I have low, mid, and high. I have them all set to mid-range, and then I've got my white noise coming in. And so I set my window to rectangle. I put the center here at 10 kilohertz, and then I'm going to go 2 kilohertz per division, and my scale I'm going to have 5 millivolts. I mean, that just depends on what's coming in here. And then my reference level, I just put that to where I can see it. I'm going volts RMS instead of volts dB, so that I don't get so it's less exaggerated. And then so then you can kind of see that if I turn my treble way down, you can see the response kind of drop off. If I turn it way up, you can see the response pop up. And we can use our cursors to kind of see where those transitions are happening. Like that's 1 kilohertz there. It's pretty, like this particular amp has very little low end on it, but here let me turn the low end way up. Yeah, you don't see it move much at all. One thing I found here though is if you go back to math, set the display to average, and then set it up to about 30. Or around there. I mean, it depends a little bit, but then you'll see the wave kind of clean up a little bit, and you can see your response a little bit better. I think right now I have the bass and the treble cranked. Let me pull the mid-range up. And this is just a crappy amp. And because you're averaging, the response change is a lot slower, so you can move this down if you don't want to wait quite as long. So we're going from about 20, if we look at our we're going from about 40 hertz is our lowest. We're going all the way to, or we're seeing all the way to 20 kilohertz. I can spread that out. And then move my center. To 5 kilohertz. And then come back here. Whoops, too much. That gives you a better representation of the response. I have everything cranked all the way up here. The averaging is not too bad, but I think it's averaging 10 times, and each FFT takes, looks like a second a piece. So I'm going to turn the treble, which has most of the effect on this amp. So that's a treble about halfway. And you see the waveform starting to come down. So I don't know, it's not a... Yeah, it doesn't seem like the mid-range has that much of an effect on this amp. But the treble seems to have a big effect. This is with the bass all the way up and the treble and the mid-range all the way up. So now I've got the stereo hooked up, and again I'm pumping white noise into it, and then out the back I have the dummy load hooked up. And so here you can kind of, let me change the cursor. So it looks pretty flat across that, and I have the bass and treble just at the midpoints. Let me turn the bass up and see if I can get any. And there you can see the the bass really rising. Yeah, rising up into about a 1 kilohertz. Now let me turn up the treble. And again, it's doing the averaging, so it takes a little while to kind of come around. So I'm going to turn them back to the midpoint. And I'm averaging, and you can see up here, you can see you're averaging 10 times. And now I'm going to turn on the loudness. So this is just the loudness button. So yeah, you can kind of see how characterize how it's behaving and where it's coming in and out. So I just turned on the high filter button. You can see this is dropping down now. Let me turn up the averaging, see how much that cleans it up. So that's the first average. So when you change the averaging, it just starts over. So I think the stereo's rated at 24 watts per channel, and I think as you start to turn it up, start to see the distortion grow a little bit. Here you start to see clipping. Yeah, when you start to see clipping, then you start to see the real distortion there. So this doesn't have anything to do with the FFT, but I thought it was kind of interesting. I have my signal generator set up to sweep in just under a second from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and I have it triggered to trigger that sweep from this kind of cheapy signal generator. And then over at my scope, you can see that it's this is the beginning of the sweep, and this is the end of the sweep. 20 hertz, 20 kilohertz. So here I'm going to turn up the bass. It's lagging a little bit, but here you can see it cranking up there. That's cool. And I'm going to turn down the treble. So that's all the way down. Or if I turn them back to both of them back to mid, turn on the high filter. High filter off. That's the loudness. So that's my demo. Again, when I was looking for a scope, I didn't see a lot of information on the FFT, so I hope me just kind of going through it a little bit gives you a good idea for its capabilities and what it can do. See if it's for you.